You're still watching the Eastern Business Report right here on the Afia Business Morning, and today we are exploring a topic that has sparked debates across the country: states creation. With calls growing louder for the creation of new states, many are asking, is this a solution to underdevelopment or just another political move? We'll be looking at potential opportunities, risk, and what this could mean for local communities, businesses, and economy at large. Joining me now is Dr. Ifediora Amobi, an economist. You're welcome on the program, sir.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
How are you doing today? Good morning.
I'm doing well.
So, the governor of Enugu State just returned from Afia State, and state creation was part of the reason they went there. It was one of the discussions they had. We've been saying this even at the National Assembly, House of Assembly, and all of that. Why do you think this is becoming a priority now? And what's your thought on state creation? I would like to get that.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, my thoughts on state creation is that first, it is not a priority at this time. We have so many other things to worry about as a country and as a people that creating more states, which of course increases the financial burden on both existing states and the potential new states, is not something that we want to be saddled with at this particular time. When issues of state creation come up, of course, those who, advocate it are mostly those in the political class who have their own personal, interests. For the general people themselves, it's not a priority, and it's not something that has really benefited, or rather the impact from historical state creation over the past 50 years or 60 years hasn't really had much of an impact. We talk about the good old days, how things were in the past, and that past was when we had 12 states, when we had less than the number of states that we had now, and things were run better, even at that time, than now. And so, I don't see it as something that should even be on the front burner at this time. If it even comes up as a topic, as far as I'm concerned, we should be worried more about creating a balance with the already existing states. We have the Southeast, for instance, that only has 5 states, whereas there's a region that has up to 7 states. And so the discussion and the energy should center around creating a state to have that balance in the Southeast, first and foremost. Because, we have been shortchanged for the past 30 years, 29 years, since the last time General Abacha created states in 1986, or 1996 or thereabout. And so that, to me, should be more of a priority than trying to approve, over 30 states that had just gone to the National Assembly.
There's been talks that if this happens, there will be room for development and employment. Do you see this happening?
Definitely not. And just like I said before, we had more development and employment in the good old days when we had less states. And so creating new states, yes, you can argue that it gets people closer to it gets government closer to the grassroots.
Yeah.
But then, who says that creating additional states will not create additional states in the future, and more in the future, and more in the future, to a point where every city or every village becomes a state? Creating states comes with it a huge burden of government bureaucracy. You create 10 more states, you have 10 more state governors, you have 10 more bureaucratic machineries to now worry about. And then you look at our national revenue from oil, which is a fixed amount, on the average. If we are selling up to our OPEC quota of 1.52 million barrels per day at a fixed oil price that we have no control over, that means that our revenue is pretty much determined. If let's say Enugu State doesn't have enough or Imo State or Ebonyi State doesn't have enough within their budget to execute their projects for this year because of lack of funds, additional states will just cut whatever they have because the existing state will have to sacrifice, money coming from the center. And so the more states you create, the less funds are going to be available to all the states to even take care of their recurrent expenditure, not to even talk about, their capital projects. And so, for me, I don't really I see more of a demerit in talking about state creation right now than I see, any merit or gain.
Yeah, but with the way things are going, it's looking like this might happen or it might come to fruition. How can local businesses in newly created states anticipate and manage the risk of artificial inflation? Because when a new state is created, everyone will want to, maybe look for lands to buy houses, do this and do that. So other people, new indigents of the state, can also buy. And this might lead to artificial inflation. How can we manage that risk?
Well, the major risk of state creation mostly is ethnic, I don't want to use the word ethnic cleansing, but it's close to that. Once a new state is created, there's this move, to start moving people back to their own states, back to their home states, right? And that takes like between 9 months and 12 months of distraction. And with it comes the whole disruption in businesses, in households, livelihoods, etc. Because now you have civil servants, for instance, working or who have put in so many years in a particular state. Suddenly they're now members or they're now citizens of a new state. They have to relocate, they have to be displaced. Sometimes compensation is not paid, new housing. I mean, there's so much disruption that it creates chaos, not only in terms of the state or the new state even settling in, it creates chaos within the family of, or families of the workers themselves. And so, which of course affects, businesses, whether small, or large. And also, you just mentioned that it looks like it's going to happen. Personally, I don't think so.
Okay.
Well, the process of creating new states is not as easy as we think. The Constitution, stipulates it. And it was put there to make it difficult. We've been talking about state creation since 1999, but no government has been able to do that. Because it's not just a bill being passed at the National Assembly and then, the president signs it. No, there's a whole lot more. The states have to be involved, the local governments have to be involved, the citizens of the states have to vote in a referendum organized by INEC before we can even proceed.
Of which most of them are disagreeing, because there was a report
Exactly.
yesterday. They were saying we don't see need for other states.
Absolutely.
I mean, let's talk about better in our states instead of creating other states.
Yeah, and so it's always been like that. And that is why, if you look at the history of Nigeria, or the history of state creation in Nigeria, it has only been done by military dictators. Where one person can just say, okay, I'm creating 6 states, and that's it, and the states are created. For it to go through the constitutional process, it's an almost impossible task. And so I don't see anything different happening this time around. We will discuss this. 2027 will come, we'll have our elections, we'll go back to the table again, we'll discuss it some more. Because there's really no benefit in it. I think the proposal is to increase the states to about 67, if it scales through, if what was submitted scales through. That means we're going to have 67 states. 67 states, we can barely manage viable 36 states. We were better off when we had 3 regions. Then we had 12 states. And if you actually notice, the states that are even doing well are the original states, like Lagos, like Rivers, like Kano, that haven't really been diluted. Because they, once you start splitting states up, you run into problems. When Nigeria was regionalized, the whole idea was to bring development, to increase trade and commerce, and that's why each region had an international border. Either you bordered with countries in the north or you had seaports in the south. When the fourth region was created, Midwest, it made sure that there was access to the ocean to also enable, trade. Once we started splitting states and started making them landlocked and had started having states within a state within a state, there's nothing a state that is landlocked can do better than a state that has, a boundary. Either a boundary, a seaport, thereabout, because the whole idea behind state creation actually is development. And if you're stifling development on the one hand and saying you want to now, I can't have access. If I have to import things into Enugu, I have to go through state 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and all the roadblocks and obstacles involved. We're back to square one. And so the more states we create, the more problems we're actually, creating for ourselves. So we have to move away from the political manipulation of our politicians that just want to create states and, are proposing these things for their own, everybody wants to have a state so that eventually they can go from the National Assembly to become governors, etc. And that's about it. 36 states we have today. The government even tells us from statistics that more than 20 of them are not sustainable, financially. If it's not for the center that allocates funds, they won't even be able to survive. So the more you create, the more states you now throw below the poverty line, and the more people get impoverished. Because by the time that new small state builds its government house and builds its commissioners and special advisors and assistants and PAs and LAs and all the A's that go with that, around the governor and the whole security, money is gone. And that is why we haven't developed up till this time. The major infrastructure that we have in Nigeria today is the infrastructure that was put up by the military. In the southeast, for instance, we have 3 major highways. We haven't built any since. You come from Onitsha, you go to Owerri. You come from Onitsha, you go to Abakaliki. You go from Imo, Abia, to Enugu, Abakaliki. It's that triangle. The head bridge, this way, that way, and in the north. No new highway has been built since then. No other major infrastructure has come into the southeast because we keep splitting it up. And these things were put together when it was maybe the oldest central state, where you can say, okay, here's the state, you budget for it, it's done. We haven't been able to do anything. We're even having problems maintaining the infrastructure that was put up after the Civil War. Our bridges, our roads are collapsing. We haven't built new roads. We're just resurfacing and just, retiring and everyone's taking, working governor, working president. It's just maintenance. So we have to break that, and we cannot do that by creating more states. We cannot move forward by creating new states because we'll just sink ourselves further.
You mentioned earlier that perhaps there could be, one more state added to the Southeast region. What impacts do you think this will have on the region's economy?
At least politically, it will douse a lot of the agitation, especially from this part of the South. Okay? We have Igbo-speaking states beyond the 5 southeastern states. And so we can carve, let's take, for instance, now, a state that's close to us, like Delta, right? we can create an Anioma state, for instance, and that becomes the sixth state in the Southeast. We're all Igbo speaking, we all share the same culture, same language, same traditions and everything, and the same values. So something like that will now say, okay, at least the South-South has 6 states, Southeast now has 6 states, Southwest and the rest of them. Let's just worry about the Northwest that has a 7th state. If we have to now create more states, if there is a need to, then we can say, okay, let each region have an additional state to become 7. We don't need 31 new states or thereabout, And so, that for me makes more sense than having to now split Ebonyi into 3, split Enugu into 2, split Anambra into 4, split Imo into 7. I mean, we're just making, a joke of the whole thing.
We've been talking about this, and you're of the opinion that you don't see this happening. And I am of the opinion that it may happen, it might happen. When this happens, how might new states generate new revenue?
They won't be able to.
At all?
They won't be able to. No, they will not. See, because, and I talked about our oil revenue, right? That is fixed, that is based on our budget. FAC, the Federal Allocation Committee, will provide a certain amount every month for the states to share. If they provide 1 billion naira and 36 states share 1 billion naira, each state gets a certain amount based on the sharing formula. If the number of states increase, each state will get less. So the new states will now receive less income without much in terms of IGR, because to start generating IGR as a new state and a new state capital and all that, the little IGR you get will go into providing infrastructure, because you have to now build a new secretariat. You have to buy, new cars and build houses for your judges and commissioners. And I mean, there's just so much going on that it takes about 10 years to even find some type of stability. And in 10 years, other states like Lagos, Rivers, and have moved on. You're still trying to put together the basics. These states are thinking, they've gone beyond that. And so you end up still playing catch up. Then you now have places in the north that are still behind a lot of the other states in the south. And you split those ones up. So you're just dragging those ones even further back down, because where will they generate money from? Where will the revenue come from? There's only so much the center can do. And if tomorrow FAC dries up, then what happens? So I think we should even be talking about how states can even work with each other to create blocks, whether it is regional, geopolitical, whatever it is, to now forge their own. And that's probably why the development commissions are being set up to help in developing the regions, the Southeast Development Commission, the Northwest, the South-South, etc. And that is where we should focus on more than fragmentation. Because
this might spring up new businesses, job employment, and other things.
What, the new state creation?
Yes, exactly.
It would. How would it? How would it? Because, yes, I can say, okay, I'm going to start a new business because I'm now in a new state. But where will my revenue come from? If the state is not making money, the people are not making money. You're going to have new civil servants that will be owed salary for the first 10 years. The government will barely be able to fulfill their recurrent obligations. And they still have capital projects to do. So all the money will now be spent on the elites within the state government, from the governor, deputy governor, the commissioners, the chief of staffs, and then all their aides and all that. And so, where is the rest of the money going to? Nowhere. So you're just pulling people backwards. It's not something For me personally, as an economist, I will not even put that on the table right now. We have more things to worry about as a country. For me, it's just a distraction.
All right, Dr. Ifediora, before we let you go, what would you say or what do you think is the way forward?
Well, the way forward, like I said, will be to focus more on the things that matter, growing the economy, right? If we have to even discuss it, and like I said before, let us think about creating a balance first and foremost. Have that 6 state for the Southeast first. Give it time, because for 30 years we've been in a region with 5 states where the national revenue is divided based on the size of the governments. How many local governments, how many states you have within your region. So we have been shortchanged for 30 years. So let us at least be at par first. And then, if there is need, which I wouldn't think there would be even in the future for more states, we can create more local governments. I am for that. Create more local governments, let government get to the grassroots. We don't need states for government to get to the grassroots. More states will just make government go to the elite and people in government. More local governments will now bring government down to the world level. We strengthen the local governments that we have today. For me, that is even more paramount than creating new states and then just completely, having an over-bloated federal structure.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ifediora Amobi, for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And that's all we can take on the Eastern Business Report. Till I see you on Monday at 10 a.m. for another edition of Afia Business Morning. I am Marvelous Apwamaga, saying have a profitable business day. Thank you for watching.